The United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres called on all parties in the Israel-Palestinian conflict to allow mediation efforts to intensify and succeed. The United Nations Security Council is meeting over the ongoing conflict that erupted on Monday. Pope Francis also called for an end to fighting during his weekly address in St. Peter's Square at the Vatican. In a televised speech today, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that an end to 7 days of hostilities was not imminent. So earlier today, Israeli airstrikes killed 33 Palestinians, including 13 children, in Gaza, according to health officials there, while militants continued to fire rockets into Israel. According to health officials in Gaza, the pre-dawn attacks were on houses in the center of Gaza City. The death toll in Gaza jumped to 181, including 52 children, since the fighting erupted on Monday. In Israel, 10 people, including 2 children, have been killed in rocket attacks by Hamas and other militant groups. Israel's Security Cabinet was due to meet later today to discuss those hostilities. Let's get the latest now, joined live by SABC News correspondent at the United Nations in New York, Sherwin. Bryce-Pease, a very good evening to you. Thanks indeed for your time. So what's the latest? Just about an hour or an hour and a half ago or so, the United Nations Secretary-General quite vocal on the ongoing hostilities.
Their message, Chrisdelda, continues to be consistent on this issue. They've been calling for a de-escalation in the region. He called for a ceasefire as early as Friday of last week, again reiterating his call for this ceasefire, warning that it has the potential to unleash an uncontainable security and humanitarian crisis and to further foster extremism, not only in the occupied Palestinian territory in Israel, but in the region as a whole. He opened the ongoing meeting in the Security Council earlier. Let's watch what the Secretary General had to say.
The current hostilities are utterly appalling. This latest round of violence only perpetuates the cycles of death, destruction and despair, and pushes farther to the horizon any hopes of coexistence and peace. Fighting must stop. It must stop immediately. Rockets and mortars on one side, aerial and artillery bombardments on the other must stop. I appeal to all parties to heed this call. The United Nations is actively engaging all sides towards an immediate ceasefire. The only way forward is to return to negotiations with the goal of a two-state solution, leaving 2 states side by side in peace, security and mutual recognition, with Jerusalem as the capital of both states, all based on relevant UN resolutions, international law and prior agreements.
General's Middle East envoy, Chrisdelda, Tor Vennesline, speaking directly up, he confirmed that there had 2,900 indiscriminate rocket attacks from Gaza fired by Hamas, 950 airstrikes against what Israel is calling militant targets in Gaza. As you mentioned earlier, 181 Palestinian deaths, including 52 children, 31 women. There have also been 10 Israeli deaths, including a soldier and 2 children. So the call from the UN seeking the Security Council to speak with one voice and to implement a ceasefire here.
Rockets and mortars on one side.
Well, Sherwin, one of the other things that's been raised over the past 24 hours, of course, the attacks on media there. We also heard a bit earlier on the United Nations Secretary-General speak about that as well.
Yeah, saying that he was very concerned. Of course, a lot of people in the international community, Chrisdelda, seeking more information from the Israel Defense Force as to why specifically this building in Gaza City that housed the likes of the Associated Press and Al Jazeera was targeted. We also heard from the Associated Press president calling for more information to understand why exactly Israel targeted this building. But what we also heard from the 2 protagonists in this conflict conflict, the Israelis and the Palestinians, are two very different versions. The Israelis are seeking to frame this as, an issue around their security vis-a-vis the indiscriminate rocket attacks from Gaza and Hamas, while the Palestinian foreign minister was seeking to look at the historical context here as to why Palestinians are fighting for their independence. Let's listen to both of those arguments that were made earlier in the Security Council today. Watch.
We are not two neighbors living side by side in peace. Israel is the armed thief who has entered our house and is terrorizing our family. It destroys our homes, oppresses our people, generation after generation, decades after decades, and then claims a right to security that it denies us. Why don't you put yourself on our shoes? What would you do if your country was occupied, your people persecuted, besieged, massacred? Better yet, what did you do to achieve your independence and end the oppression of your people? Israel continues proclaiming that Jerusalem is a unified capital of Israel. Have you ever seen the city more divided? The international consensus you have all helped shape and defend is being destroyed in front of our very eyes. The alternative that Israel chose is apartheid. Yes, apartheid. And one day soon, even this council will not be able to deny this reality.
Member of the Security Council, let me ask you, what would you do if thousands of terrorist rockets were being fired at your country, at your people, at your parents or children? How would you respond if an organization with a similar fanatic jihadist ideology as ISIS was bombing Beijing or Moscow or Dublin and shutting down the airports of Paris or Oslo or London? What would you expect the Security Council to do? Mr. President, this is not the first time that Hamas has indiscriminately fired deadly missiles at Israeli civilians while hiding behind Palestinian civilians. But this time, it's different. It was completely premeditated by Hamas in order to gain political power. It was all a part of their vicious plan. While Hamas seeks the destruction of the state of Israel, it's also vying to take power in the West Bank and to replace the Palestinian Authority.
Chrisdelda, Ambassador Gilad Erdan also, Hamas uses children to protect its missiles. Israel uses missiles to protect its children. Palestinian Foreign Minister Riyad Malki also saying how many Palestinians Palestinian deaths is worthy of condemnation. What is the threshold for outrage from the international community? And certainly a question that they are seeking answers from the UN Security Council today, Chrisdelda.
Sherwin, thank you very much. SABC News correspondent.